I sort of became disillusioned with money in a way. I think I recognized the value of money is tied up to what's behind it, what it can do for you.
Fountain app is so good. Like, it's such a good...
Literally wearing the shirt now.
Nice.
Then you as a supporter can put in some Bitcoin, give back to your favorite podcaster while listening. A way of getting Bitcoin without, and in particular Lightning Bitcoin, without having to do any KYC, without having to even really know what Bitcoin is. Have wanted to use it more in those international type ways with supporting other people. I was DCAing, but into the highest period. Thankfully, though, I've always found it easier to dollar cost average as it's on its way down. That process of sending it to a wallet that is solely you for the first time, yeah, that's scary. And the very first time I sent some, as a little test, it's absolutely nerve-wracking.
Welcome to Get Off Zero, hashtag Get Off Zero. If you want to contact me, probably the best place is on Twitter, so at Kyrin Down. You can also jump onto the Amber website, so get amberapp.com/podcast, and that's got all the deets for it there. So we've got a very special guest today that I'm really excited to jump into his learning journey and, find out like how, like we've done an interview before, but find out like the ins and outs of his BTC learning journey specifically, because I think it's going to be quite different to a lot of other people. So, Kyrin, thanks for joining us. Super excited to have you on the show. We've done a podcast before, and your research was just like mind blowing, like how much effort you put in. I was really blown away. So like as soon as I started doing this Get Off Zero podcast, I thought, I've got to get you on to have a chat again. But do you want to give us a bit about your background, what you're working on, what your podcast is, and any cool stuff you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my pleasure, Kyrin. And so my name's Kyrin. So we're the Kyrin. This is we're
nearly
going to make sure we distinguish between those two. Oh man, the research part of podcasting is almost half the fun of it, man. I really enjoy that. So great to be on, man. It's going to be super fun. So like quick backstory. I'm Brisbane based. Grew up here. I was always kind of like good with maths and numbers. So after high school, didn't really know what to do. So went into engineering, got a mining engineering degree, worked out in the mines, in particular the Bowen Coal Basin, for about 3 years. And ended up just kind of leaving that. Didn't love it, didn't hate it either. And started pursuing other passions. So traveled around Latin America for about a year and a bit, and that'll be kind of pertinent a little bit later on. And once I came back, just started podcasting. So yeah, I've got the Mere Mortals podcast, the Mere Mortals book reviews, and the Value for Value podcast, which is also going to be tying into what we're talking about today.
Do you want to run us through those podcasts a little bit and just sort of describe them?
Yeah, for sure. So Mere Mortals is one that I do with a friend of mine, Juan, who I've known since 13 years old. So yeah, like 17 years ago, something like that now. And that one was deep conversations with a lighthearted touch. So typically we'll do 2, sometimes 3 episodes a week. And some episodes are kind of off the wall a little bit, like the lighthearted touch sort of thing. So we'll just bring up, whatever we're thinking about recently. So one went to Tasmania. I was looking into some like NFTs and things like that. And then we'll typically have like a themed one as well. So this is getting more into like the philosophy of things. So picking a topic like character or value or procrastination, insert whatever, long-term goals, things like that. The Mere Mortals book reviews, they're pretty simple. I just read a book and then I'll just do a book review of it. So typically those are, I like to focus on the classics type of thing. So usually a little bit older books, but it can be a pure mix. I honestly have no idea what'll be kind of coming up on there. And then the Value for Value one is one I do kind of intermittently. So the book reviews is usually once a week type deal. And then the Value for Value is, I do seasons, so I'll sometimes do like a weekly thing for I don't know, 18 weeks, something like that. So I've produced 2 seasons so far, and that's all around the concept of the value for value model. So it's relatively simple. It's basically like I'm producing value of some sort. So typically this is a digital product, so like a podcast, and instead of using something like the advertising model, i.e. putting adverts into my show, putting a paywall on my product. So it'll be like, listen to the first half of it, and then if you want to listen to the second half, you have to pay. Or the Patreon one, which is more, I'll produce additional benefits, goodies behind the scenes, things like that, and you have to pay to get those. The value for value is essentially like I provide the value up front. Here it is, free. You never have to send anything back in terms of monetary support or even any of the other ways that you can transfer value. But, I request that you do. And so if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the product, send in, you can share it with a friend. You can give it a like. You can, send through, correct me on any errors or anything like that, a particular talent that you might have. And then there's some really cool stuff coming out related to the kind of open source standards of podcasting and how this is merging with Bitcoin and the other, I guess, like crypto assets that are out there, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. No, so I'm doing the same model for our other podcast, Bitcoin Aggregated.
Nice.
Doing that since the start of the year with my co-host Lung Doge at Lung Doge on Twitter. But yeah, it's something magical about doing the value for value when you see, particularly on the Lightning Network, when you see those sats streaming in from people listening and seeing like where they're coming from. So weirdly enough, like most of our listeners come from Argentina.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm like, oh my what? Like no, like not many from Australia.
It's actually not that weird. I'll be able to tell you why that's not weird.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, that's interesting. And then people paying in sats to listen. So and seeing that kind of in real time after you upload is just such a cool thing. But we'll get into that.
We had like a big Indian viewership for a while. It was just
right.
All our downloads were coming from India. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah. Oh, no, I'd love to dive more into that. But before we do, just wanted to do so. The first question off the bat. So, documenting your learning journey. When did you first sort of hear about Bitcoin? Because we'll kind of get into that, but. When did you first question, like, what money is, or sort of where it comes from? Like, what was the time and the place that sort of sparked that idea in your head, if it has happened?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's 2 answers to that for me. The first one would be pretty recently, in terms of like last year, of actual sitting down, looking at and investigating. What is this thing that we call money? What is it backed up by? How does it work? I guess why are there different types of money? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A handy book for that, just as a straight up recommendation, is the Bitcoin Standard by Saif Moose. That's those sorts of books like that are very, very helpful. And then I had an experience when I was really young. I'm going to say like 7 years old, something like that, where I saw this toy on TV, which was essentially, the doctor where you have some tweezers and you got to get it out with touching.
And you zap yourself. Yeah.
It was a version of that, but it was kind of like a rotating cone. And so basically you would have people, friends on all sides. And as it rotates around, you're like trying to take things out or put it back in. I can't even remember what it was called. But I think it was like $50, something like that. And I bought it, and I just remember seeing the adverts on TV of all these kids having their friends around, having so much fun. And I got it, and it was just such a disappointment. It was I'd saved up my pocket money. $50 wasn't a nothing thing for me back then, and I sort of became disillusioned with money in a way. I think I recognized the value of money is tied up to what's behind it, what it can do for you, rather than what it is as itself. So I've always, I think, had a I've never fell into the keeping up with the Joneses trap, that sort of thing. I've always sort of viewed money in terms of, what enjoyment it can bring me. How many hours of work would this product or whatever this thing is cost? So it's not the dollar amount. It's kind of, I've always thought about it in other terms. So that I think has been a constant thing for me since as a kid. But then the actual kind of research and being able to explain, what are the kind of the three characteristics of money? Why is, gold better than shells and rocks, and why are shells and rocks better than cattle, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and the scarcity and all that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So yeah, a board game essentially sparked the interest.
Shitty one at that as well.
Yeah.
It also explains why I'm not that big a fan of advertising.
Yeah, no, it does. That's some real insight. So on that same train of thought then, so when did you first hear about Bitcoin, sort of year, place, time, and then we'll kind of get into like when you started first using it. So yeah, the first time you heard about it.
Yeah, probably would have been when I was in my later years of university, so 2012, 2013.
Yep.
I'm guessing it would have been right around the Mt. Gox, or the first kind of big bubble that occurred back then, when it started to seep out into mainstream news, which I still somewhat had I still somewhat read back then, but not so much anymore. And yeah, it didn't apply to me. Didn't mean anything to me. Online thing. I didn't see any real use case for me particularly. So it was just as useful as, I don't know, when maybe drones were getting really popular. It's like, oh, that's a cool thing, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
An interesting tech.
Yeah. When I first started taking it a little bit more seriously was in 2018. So I was basically about to go on this big travel of I've got a map behind me of Latin America. And that was when I was starting to realize, okay, like I need how do you actually go about traveling? I'd never actually really gone overseas anywhere before other than New Zealand. So, which is pretty much, little Australia. So
yeah.
Going to somewhere completely different was going, okay, what backup money do I need to use? Will I be able to use debit cards or credit cards overseas? How important is cash? How do you get cash? That sort of stuff. And that was when I started to realize, wow, there is a lot of middlemen in all of these processes. So, getting US dollars here as a kind of backup thing, I was flying into Chile, so getting some Chilean pesos, you'd lose 5-10% straight off the bat in your own country. And then if you're looking at ATM fees, if you're looking at the intercambios, or like the cambios, so this is just the exchanges in those countries, you're losing just 15%, every single time, sort of deal.
Wow.
And that's when I went, oh yeah, this Bitcoin thing. This could maybe come in handy. That I could get Bitcoin in Australia and still have Bitcoin in Chile, and if I can somehow use that to extract Chilean pesos or something like that, I won't have to pay any middlemen. This is awesome. So I'm pretty sure I kind of got some Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum and Litecoin as well, just as a whatever thing in around that time, 2017. Thankfully, after the big crash, big boom and crash then. But I wasn't able to use it. That was the real problem. So when I was looking up just online, how can is there ATMs? Is there an ATM I can use? Not really. And if there wasn't enough information to be able to see how I could use it in different big cities or things like that. So I was kind of actually disillusioned a little bit, just going, what's the point of this thing if I can't use it for as a money? I didn't really understand the store of value prospect that it had, and I was more looking at it in terms of I want to use it as a money, and I couldn't really. So I had it and I held on to it, but I wasn't able to use it for anything. So yeah, that was definitely my introduction to it, which was it seems like everyone needs to have a couple bites of the cherry, and those were my, I guess, like first two bites of it, and came away underwhelmed for sure.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So as a travel tool, because there really wasn't, I suppose, the exchanges or the ATMs, I suppose, that there are now.
No,
For
no.
traveling.
And I mean, even now, you'd have to know what you're looking for. So I think Wallet of Satoshi is pretty good for. They've got like a kind of interactive map that you can go on and look.
Yeah.
But if they were around back then, I certainly didn't know about it, and so I think maybe it was technically possible to be able to do this. Like if I'd gone into certain forums, I'm pretty sure there would have been people who would have either exchanged it on the spot for you, so you could have done like an in-person type deal, or there might have been some actual physical infrastructure, but getting that for yourself without knowing that, without having all the understanding of Bitcoin and being in the kind of arena for a year or 2 years or however long, it's just, there was no way it was going to happen. No way.
Yeah. Well, that's so fascinating. So I had the opposite experience around that same time, so 2017, going to Japan, which we probably got into on the last podcast that we did. But it was when Japan announced that they were accepting it as a currency. I forget like what the actual stipulation was, but basically all these big businesses started accepting it over there. I'm like,
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we went over and brought a bunch of BGC and alts as well, I think at the time. And literally like the day we got there, I looked up like the meetups in Tokyo, and Roger Ver was doing a meetup. I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
that was
nice.
Like back when Roger Ver was cool.
yeah. Before BSC.
Well, yeah, exactly right. So, but the crazy thing was, like, we got over there. I'm like, oh, like, said to my girlfriend, we have to go to this meetup. Like, let's go. She's like, no, I'm not doing a stupid work thing. Like, like, no, we have to go. So I drug her along. And it was this really cool bar, and it was like off the plane accepting BTC. I'm like, oh, this is magic. And it was so funny because I had no idea about Bcash or Bitcoin Cash or any of the fork wars or block size discussions that were going on. And I heard it straight from the horse's mouth. So he was like, had a small group of people and explained like why the block size was too small, it needs to be expanded. And he was so like eloquent and articulate. I went away thinking, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, cool. All right, maybe the block size is going to get increased, I guess, and didn't think much of it. And then came back to Australia, and there was like this big blow up of these fork wars. I'm like, oh, yeah, I just met that guy who was like instigating all this.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating because it was like all these cool places I went to in Japan, and bought a bunch of stuff for the school at the time. Like got like controllers for the kids to use, like to build their own gaming installations and stuff. And it was all BTC that you could spend over there. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I missed out, man, because I was in Central America in early 2019, late 2018. And I'm pretty sure that Bitcoin Beach was around then, or at least they were doing things then. And I just, just had no idea, just completely passed over me. So if I'd known about it, I think I might have gone, like, even just for the interest of it, just being like, okay, like you can this thing that I was trying to do, maybe I could do it here. But yeah, just had no idea. Hey.
Yeah. So that sort of brings us to like the origin story of actually utilizing or getting off zero. So like utilizing BTC for the first time, actually, you own some BTC and some altcoins, obviously.
Yeah.
But what was the first use case after that?
Yeah. So I literally did get off zero because when COVID happened and all the stocks and stuff went down, I was like, dang, like this is guaranteed. Like I know these things are going to go back up, not knowing, of course, that that Bitcoin and everything would go up, double or quadruple times that. So yeah, in 2020, I sold everything that I had, and BTC and stuff wasn't on the radar, even though it was in the news, and I was just seeing crazy stuff like Dogecoin is worth X many billion, and just going, what the hell, it once again wasn't leaving good impressions of me for me of what crypto was about.
Yeah.
And it actually started from a problem I was having with podcasting. So like I was saying, I'm not a fan of advertising. I've got some of my own kind of like ethical qualms against that. Just feel like it does become easier to get into a sensorial sort of nature, whether it's be watching my own words and not saying something bad about a product,
Yep.
or if you're getting to the higher levels where people are paying you directly, you're not going to say bad things or talk about certain topics and things like that. And
yeah, a good. Sorry to cut you off, but a good example of that might be like what Bitcoin did. Like, I love that podcast. I think Peter's amazing at what he does. But there's certain companies on there, like Compass being one of them, that he probably wouldn't get behind, but because they're paying him, he kind of has to. So totally get your point on that for sure.
Yeah, and it's it's a self mechanism, it's a self security mechanism as well. I've followed a lot of people over the years who, whether they talk about certain risque topics, whether they just get caught in the crossfire of some broader cultural movement or something like that, and Amazon will not let them sell their books. PayPal will cut them off. And you're still seeing this a lot more nowadays as well. With there was a recent controversy with PayPal, misinformation, finding people in it, or like they were going to, and it's just like, geez, okay, who gets to determine that sort of thing?
Yeah.
So I was having this problem where I was like, okay, look, I'm taking this podcast pretty seriously. I've been doing this for a year and a half, 2 years now, sort of deal, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to particularly do the Patreon model. I've also am like, my podcast should be available anytime, anywhere for anyone. I'm not a fan of paywalls and putting things and doing extra things behind the scenes. It kind of felt like I was devaluing my own product, and so I was on a random. There's a guy in Brisbane here called James Cridland who is kind of a podcast journalist, I guess you'd say. He's got one called Pod News, and I was on a random, just imagine the most random, out of left field conference that you could find. This was when COVID was happening, or there was still COVID after effects. So, I was just online on my laptop listening to these random people talking about random stuff about podcasts. And I was on there because he was on there, and he mentioned, he was kind of doing this talk related to podcast. I think it was like distribution and how, what the podcasting around the globe sort of thing. And then right at the end, kind of casually offhand, he was talking about this thing called podcasting 2.0 and how Bitcoin was interacting with it. And basically it got down to, what I came away from it was, if you sort of join this movement, Adam Curry, the guy who was basically one of the inventors of podcasting, was going to send you Bitcoin. And so once again, my scam radar was just like through the roof, going, what the hell? Why will he send me Bitcoin for doing a podcast? This makes no sense. But it got me interested enough to try and figure out what's going on. What are they doing? And so podcasting 2.0 was basically trying to extend the RSS and namespace for podcasting. So, for instance, if you go on to Apple at the moment and listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, they might have chapters, so you can put in images and whatnot into your RSS feed. But how often have you heard someone say, just go to www.randomreference.com/blah, blah, 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 blah. And this is so inconvenient. What if you could actually have that link, if you were the podcaster, put that link in at that time, and then when you're talking to your listener, you just say, click on the link that's showing up on your screen, bam, they can go directly to it. So there's all these sorts of things that podcasting could do. You could have comments in them, but at the moment, if you leave a comment on Apple, you'll only ever see it in the Apple app and things like that. So they were trying to expand this to become more open source and more open just in general. So if there was people who were using an app like Podcast Addict, and they left a comment in there. There's no reason that comment shouldn't be able to be surfaced on one like Pocket Casts or in Spotify if they chose to, and things like that. So they were working on this, and then additionally they were working on being able to, I guess, monetize your podcasts. I'm not a fan of that word, but we'll go with that. Monetize your podcast by including a Lightning address or a Bitcoin Lightning address directly into your RSS feed, so that this way there's no one central actor who's saying, "Oh yes, you PayPal, click on this link and you can send us through some money." No, it's directly what's talked about in the Bitcoin white paper, a peer-to-peer network. So this is where you can put a Lightning address in your feed, and then if people are listening on certain podcast apps that are more, I suppose, modern, who are more following the trends and know what's going on, then you as a supporter can put in some Bitcoin, load it up into a wallet on the actual app, and then you can give back to your favorite podcaster while listening. And this blew my mind. I just went like, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. It ticked all the boxes of things I care about, open source, of not having middlemen, of being able to interact directly with your podcast audience. It made so much sense to me. So yeah, I started to join that community, started to send some sats around, and start using these new apps, and then it went from there. It just really, it gave me sleepless nights, being like, okay, wow, yeah, this is the future. Like, this is going to solve so many problems.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. I love the fact that it was podcasting. And Adam Curry, like, shout out to Adam, like and Dave Jones.
The
who
two
runs
of them
it with him.
Yeah.
Man, like, they're such. Dave was meant to come on the podcast, and I was crazy sick like about a month ago.
Oh, bummer.
So yeah, I gotta chat with him again because he's such a cool guy.
Yeah.
But
well, that's actually how I heard about you, because
right,
he was on your first one.
IP First podcast. Yes.
Correct, yeah,
that's right. Yeah. God, so many podcasts. But no, for anyone who doesn't know, yeah, Adam Curry basically invented podcasting, and there's a really good Rogan episode, like his most recent one, where he kind of goes through that whole story, and it's well worth a listen. But yeah, such a cool guy, and he's like not. What I love about him as well, he's like not greedy at all. Like, he could be, a gazillionaire by now, but he's not really motivated by that. He just wants, like, basically to have the ability for people to communicate without middlemen. Like, that's essentially what he's building, right?
Yeah. So the value for value model, that's his baby. That's something that he's done forever on his show No Agenda. Now they use PayPal, and they've used PayPal and also kind of like cash gifts. So if you want to send in money to a certain address, you can do it in the mail or checks and things like that.
Yeah.
But he's the one who I certainly heard it from first, and that's what inspired me to create a whole show about it. And if you listen to any of mine now, we always talk about value for value as kind of the way that you can help support the show as a listener, as a supporter. Yeah,
absolutely. It's such a cool thing, and I think you're right. It is the future. Like, these centralized oligarchs of, like, sort of disseminating information, I think that's going to go away. So, like, your centralized YouTubes, your centralized, whatever platform it is, it's not going to be around for much longer. Once enough people get the understanding of how these systems work, in particular the Lightning. I mean, it's a bit of a learning curve, but once it gets easy enough for people to utilize, I tell you what, Fountain app is so good. Like, it's such a good.
Literally wearing the shirt now.
Nice. I was about to ask, what's the t-shirt? Yeah, cool. Do you know how they do it? Like, so basically, you can. I didn't realize this, but so people were listening to my podcast, and they were getting paid through Fountain as well. So it was sats getting streamed to the listeners. I was like, what? I didn't even know that was a thing. Do you
Yeah.
know how that works?
Yeah, so it's more of a promotional thing that they started to, I suppose, expose the Bitcoin community in particular to what's going on here, because it is there's so much going on everywhere. There's people doing stuff in El Salvador. There's people like Strike. They're doing their own sort of thing. Like there's so much going on that it is hard to really be able to see each separate use case going on and whatnot.
It's huge.
So yeah, what they did was basically it's a promotional thing, and it's still somewhat going on, but to a lesser extent, where you as the podcast listener, so what I assume is that they set aside, let's just say 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, who knows how many sats, and just set that aside and said, look, we'll give this to people who are using our app and listening. And so as you're listening, you would typically I think it was like, if you listen to 60 minutes, you'd maybe get 100, 200 sats, maybe a little bit more. And then it's a way of getting Bitcoin without, and in particular Lightning Bitcoin, without having to do any KYC, without having to even really know what Bitcoin is. You just do it by listening to a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's kind of unsustainable over the long term, because obviously anyone who likes Bitcoin and likes podcasting is going to use the app and want to earn Bitcoin as you're listening. That's it's an awesome marketing play. I think they did that really, really well. And then there's I suppose a way that I'm guessing that they're going to fund this in the future, and how I've used it as well, which is me as the podcaster. I can if I wanted to expose my podcast to other people, I could advertise through Instagram. I can advertise through Facebook. I could, put it in newspapers. I could maybe take out a TV advert. There's so many different ways. Or I could do it in the actual app itself. So I've done this, and I've said, okay, there's a particular episode. So in particular for me on the book reviews channel, I did it of my review of the Bitcoin Standard by
Nice.
Safety and a Moose. And I said, I want this episode promoted. I'm willing to spend, I can't remember how much. I think it was about 150,000 sats. So, equivalent of 50, I think it was like 70 something Australian dollars. And that money was basically to go to Fountain. A portion of it would go to Fountain, and then the larger portion, so I think it was 80%, 90%, something like that, would go to people who listen to that. So it was kind of a way of advertising my own podcast. And so you can still do that. And if you go on the Fountain app at the moment, you will see right at the top in the front screen, there's usually two kind of highlighted clips or episodes or right at the top there. And this is from podcasters like myself who want to expose their podcast to a bigger audience. And instead of it being like, I'll pay, $100 to Facebook, and then Facebook keeps all of it, but it'll show it in front of a bunch of people's feeds. Now I'll pay $100 to Fountain. Fountain will take a percentage of that, and then the rest of it will actually go directly to the listener. So
that's so cool.
If you're listening, it's kind of my way of as a podcaster being like, look, I want you to check this out, and I'm willing to put some money down for this, and here's some money. Listen, awesome. Test it out, see what you think, and then if you enjoy it, I hope that I would be able to retain you as a listener, and then get you kind of in the value for value model, and then that way, if I create a show that is so good to you that you listen every single week, that's when it's starting to get to the point where it's like, I hope you'd send some value back in any of the kind of different ways that you can do that, which I listed before.
I love that. It's so cool. Well, maybe we'll do it for this episode, eh?
Yeah, man. It's a fun test out to see what happens, because while some people are listening, others will already kind of be in the system and they know what's going on. So whilst they're earning sats from you, they are simultaneously sending some back to you.
Yeah.
So if you promote an episode, I talked with Nick, one of the co-founders of Fountain, and I think he was saying the average spend, you kind of get 40% of it right off the bat. So it's kind of like, oh, even though I'm spending money, I'm literally making money at the same time. And if I can get, hook some people in with my content, with the show, I hopefully have gained some long-term listeners who will be willing to support back and, make it a long-term investment. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. I love it. So sort of switching gears a little bit, going back to Get Off Zero. So DCA, are you familiar with the term DCA,
Yep.
dollar cost average? So obviously Amber app is a DCA app, probably the best, I think anyway, the best in Australia. Makes it really simple. It's so funny actually. It was out with my mum like last week or the week before, and she's been DCAing, but using like CoinStop. And I didn't realize, like, looking at her phone, she's like, oh, I have to do this, like, manual. I'm like, what are you doing? So I set her up with Amber, like, so she's like, oh, I don't have to do it, like, manually anymore. So are you doing dollar cost average? Are you DCAing? And, yeah, how did you get started, and where are you at with that now?
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely my approach to money and investment and things like that. I kind of learned how to do this from my dad when I was buying stocks in that, kind of 2012 to 20. I mean, even nowadays sort of region.
Yep.
And yeah, it was something instinctively I was doing without even realizing it. It had a name, dollar cost averaging. It was kind of just, oh, it's, this thing has gone down, but I still understand the value in this company, which, they were typically mining companies, which I kind of understood how that industry worked. And yeah, so I would just be like, oh, it's even cheaper. Sweet. I'll buy some more, kind of like next paycheck, that sort of thing.
To clarify, gold mining companies, yeah?
No, just mining companies in general.
Okay.
So Mastermind was one, which is a kind of
minerals.
services company.
All right.
Yeah, most of it was related to coal, but whatever's good.
Not Bitcoin mining.
No, not Bitcoin mining. Sorry, I should have clarified that. The physical minerals and whatnot
mining stuff out of the ground.
Yes, correct. So yeah, I'd understand, I guess, about that then. Unfortunately, I am a mere mortal. I am only human, and so when I really started to understand about Bitcoin, and then obviously I start to get a little bit more interested in the other cryptos that are out there, just to understand, okay, like how is this different from Bitcoin? That sort of thing. Then I got swept up in the kind of craze last year of 2021, and podcasting had made it so transparent in front of my eyes of how this is going to change the world, and then also there was a fever in the air, and like anyone, I like most people, you even though you can't understand it logically, there is a FOMO, there is a like I need to get it now because it's going to be even more expensive in the future.
Yeah.
So of course, like I was DCAing, but into the highest period. And thankfully, though, I've always found it easier to dollar cost average as it's on its way down. Like just mentally, that it's like, oh, it's cheaper now. I'll buy even more. That's It's once I have the kind of conviction behind something, then it's like, okay, this is easy to do now. So yeah, I still continue to do that.
That's awesome.
And it's just taking into account the other factors in my life as well, which is just as important. Like what's my kind of like rental situation, what's my cash flows, that sort of thing. So of course I'd like to go even harder, as I'm sure everyone else would, but you have to be careful as well, especially when it's coming into riskier environments and there's more macro things going on, and it's this is where it's I like to understand about money, but I also quite dislike learning things which are not going to be relevant in 3 or 4 years' time. And so knowing about the Russia-Ukraine war and how oil prices and things dictate markets is like, it's kind of useful, but I also really don't care about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's completely fair. Yeah, it's such a different mindset when you start DCAing BTC. I suppose like when you look at the macro, yeah, it really makes you look into the future a lot further. And yeah, I think the whole mechanism of DCAing. What I love about it is the fact you can do like $5 a month if that's all you can afford. Hence the hashtag #GetOffZero. But I mean, it's accessible to anybody. So I think it's just the learning behind it. That's why I'm so fascinated to hear people's learning journeys with this. So on the same topic, little moving forward a little bit. Custodial, non-custodial, sort of where are you sitting at the moment? Are you like using an exchange, leaving it with them, hardware wallet, wallet on your phone? Where are you with that?
Yeah. It's a nuanced topic. It's one of those ones where it's you kind of need to know the basics, and it kind of gets put as a one versus the other type of deal. But I use all of them. So when it's I view some of it as kind of cash type thing, and I'm completely fine with that being held by a third entity, where if they want to at any given moment, take it away from me, that's fine. But I view it as like my wallet. I would like my literal actual wallet with cash in it. If I lost it, it would suck for sure. But it's not going to be a huge deal if the Fountain app goes down and never comes back, and I have $75 or 100 and whatever dollars of BTC on there. And I also am more willing to spread it out and not have it in certain locate, like have I've got it across across so many different stuff in Blue Wallet, and then on Albi, and then on directly on some of the podcasting apps. I've probably got BTC across 9-10 different places. And am I keeping all of those front in mind and checking on them and making sure? No, like it's almost like leaving some coins in your car. You don't need to check on that every single day. It's just it's there, and if it's not there when you're paying a toll or something, it's just like, oh dang, that's annoying. My damn brother stole it from me or something. But then, of course, for the important stuff, for the big amounts, for the kind of savings and that stuff, that's definitely where you need to. Well, we've seen it. There was a temptation for me of, I like yield and earning things as much as anyone else on my assets, and stocks has kind of put that in me, and you get dividends from stocks. That's kind of how you can make money. But thankfully, and I'm pretty sure I looked at Celsius. I'm pretty sure I looked at Celsius and was like, oh, this could be something to do. Yeah. But the ethos behind BTC of not your keys, not your crypto. Thankfully, it's stuck in me, and so I keep those on the biggest portions. Cold wallets, don't touch anything. And in the future, I'll sometimes check on them just to make sure it's there, I guess.
Health check, yeah, always a good thing to do.
But it's gotten to the point now where I'm super comfortable just leaving that on untouched and unchecked upon, because I know I've done all the right things. I know the seed phrases have never touched my computer, for example. Hardware wallets, that's something I've looked at in the past and went, I don't really need this, because I either have the kind of cash type ones where it's I don't really care, like it's the pain in the ass of getting out the ledger or the Trezor every single time to do something, that would be too much. And then also I had these wallets which I'm not touching and maybe using once a year type of deal. Those also don't really need a Trezor or a ledger. But now I am starting to kind of try and use these kind of middle amounts where it's, maybe it's a couple of $100, maybe it's a grand or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's where you I think that's where those devices come in really handy for those sort of middle ground where it's not one or the other. So I am starting to look at those a little bit more.
Cool.
Sure.
No,
And the process of taking full sovereignty of the Bitcoin, that process of sending it to a wallet that is solely you for the first time, that's scary. And that's where I was like, the very first time I sent some, as a little test, man, nerve-wracking. Even just sending like $10 as a test or something is absolutely nerve-wracking. And the test works fine, and so you're like, all right, I'll send a bigger amount. But yeah, it's I think there's that phase where you have to go through of almost like a leap of faith in a way, and just kind of you can do as much research as you want, but there is a leap of faith required at some point when you're taking full self custody of your Bitcoin.
Yeah, theory versus practice. Like, 100%. The best way to learn is actually doing transactions.
Yeah,
you can read about like UTXOs and what's a transaction hash and what's a private key, public key. Yeah, I know all that, but until you do it, you kind of don't know. I've done it. So I've done a bunch of like blockchain, like super classes. Like I did one at Edutech a number of years ago, and it was all people that were like into blockchain and crypto, or whatever, coming along to it. And it was so funny. Like I had one task was like setting up a hardware wallet. We were doing like, using basically setting up things for kids for them to go back to their school and run some programs. And we used to do like seed phrase hunts. So like seed phrase in Minecraft world, assemble the words, and then, you get the sats that are on or Doge actually we were using.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if it goes missing, basically.
Exactly.
I dread to think how much Bitcoin I've lost over the years, given to kids. Lost it. So I'm like, nah, I'm doing Doge from now on. And the worst part was when Elon like pumped it. I'm like, no, that's like the learning tool that we have. Like you've just ruined it. But what was fascinating with like people, even in the know, supposedly, like they all mixed up private, public key, and transaction hash. So put up like a Padlet on the screen. I'd be like, all right, I just need each person to put these in, tell us what it is, and they all would mix them up. I was like, yeah, see, it's theory versus practice. Like actually doing it is the big difference.
Yeah, I mean, like even then, I've said wallet a bunch of times in this conversation, and that's not the most useful way to think about where you're sending it to. Like that's not really how it works. But just the nomenclature, the words that people are using, and I think it is getting clearer, but there's still so much behind it that it's if anyone can understand fully BTC in 6 months, like they're a savant. Because it took me like bordering on like kind of 2 years now to.
Michael Saylor, I think he's the only man that's pulled it.
Got it really quick, yeah, for sure.
Well, that's what, and now to your point as well. So there's a big movement at the moment to sort of rename hardware wallets as signing devices, and there's a whole multiple Reddit threads about that, and like why we should call it that. It's an interesting topic. I think for onboarding people though, like you're sort of alluding to, like wallet is the term that people know, so let's just use that. It's kind of easier.
And maybe it will be the correct term because the first time you use it, there's going to be a whole lot of people who don't buy, thousands or tens of thousands worth of Bitcoin. They're just going to buy, well, maybe not even buy. They might acquire it like they have in Fountain, or they might
earn it.
earn it or something like that. And in that case, you know what? Yeah, say the term wallet and keep it on a device of some sort, and that's totally fine, and that's probably a good way to get like a little bit of exposure to it, in much the same way that I use the internet and I have almost zero knowledge of how HTTPS and the
Yep.
underlying protocols work. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, that's
So
right. Well, it's like your parents can send an email, but they couldn't tell you what SMTP is or how it works, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
hands up.
I,
Right
yeah.
here.
But I think we'll get to that point as well, right? So I think we're kind of there. I think like the UX for a lot of these like wallets, in particular, my favorite at the moment is Nunchuck. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's
No, I don't know
amazing.
that one. Yeah.
Definitely worth checking out. But yeah, there's so many cool ones like Wallet of Satoshi, super easy to use. It's custodial, but it works. It works like a dream, and the support's awesome. Like, yeah, those guys kill it. So switching gears, getting off zero hash rate. Have you got hash rate? Do you know like why it might be important to have even a little bit of hash rate to contribute to the network in terms of security? And have you thought about it, or are you mining at all?
Yeah, so I'm not mining myself. I have had some interaction with the kind of just local Bitcoin community here in Brisbane, but in particular the Bitcoin only one, because that's where you get the real people who are really serious about it. And I've just technically, man, it's I'm not a tech person, so it's I've always struggled with the kind of hardware issues, software issues. This computer that laptop that I have, one of the GPUs was breaking down on me, and God, just what an awful like 5 days of taking it into places, trying to get it fixed. It's there's something about the software and hardware problems that drive me insane, which is I'm actually a terrible engineer. Like in terms of like leaning into problems, which is what engineers should do. I don't do that. I do not do that. So no, I don't have any like mining rigs myself. I don't plan to, honestly. Like that's a step too far for me. I think one of the good things about Bitcoin is you can kind of choose to know where to stop, I guess. The idea that you need to have every single sat in in like a custodial, like you own the wallet yourself, that's just not that's not feasible. I think that's a silly idea to have. And much the same, I think it would be a silly idea for me to own a mining rig. But I do understand the importance of why having a higher hash rate in general is better, and why the security of the network is dependent on it. So yeah, in terms of the why it's important, I get it, I understand, but actually doing it myself, no, that's a step too far for me.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. So there's companies like I'm mining here actually, just behind the screen here. I've got some
Nice.
home miners just sitting outside, and I've got solar. So there's a couple of good podcasts actually. I forget the guy's name, but they go into basically how mining is going to be like solve the energy crisis and solve like climate change and all that sort of thing as well. It's like the inverse of the FUD that you see in a lot of the mainstream media outlets, and the obituaries like Bitcoin's dead again because it's bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Where it's actually the solution, right? So the concept is, I'm going to butcher it, but the concept is basically whatever X amount of BTC that you have of the network. So say you have like 1 BTC, you should do like mine. I think it was like 0.1% of the hash rate sort of thing. So, but do that in a green way, right? So like using solar, using wind, whatever it is. And if we can get enough like big companies to start doing that, we'll solve the energy crisis, solve emissions and all that sort of thing, and also secure the network at the same time. So I took that on board, and I was like, all right, I'll do that. So I've got some home miners, and I've got it set up here. And it's actually quite fun. And there's a company called they do Apollo miners. So the Apollo miners, you can run them at home, and they're not like extremely hot. Set them up; they're on a full node, and yeah, it's kind of fun to do. So maybe a project if you want to do it down the track. It's not as scary as it sounds.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of putting where your money where your mouth is, and actually not kind of just leeching in a way. I am a big fan of that. But yeah, in terms of realistically for me, it's just current situation, like probably not going to happen.
A bridge too far.
Yeah. But yeah, there is also other ways that you can contribute. I suppose you can perhaps buy stock of a company that does do that, so you're not directly involved, but there's certainly other ways. I want to try out a little analogy on you, which I've been working on. So,
oh shoot.
I've kind of thought, I kind of think of Bitcoin mining as like going to the toilet. So I kind of like this because it's going to piss off everyone. So
okay,
it's it's not a on the face of it, it's not a favorable analogy to Bitcoin. But when you hear about something like BTC mining consumes 1% of the world's energy, and it's like, okay, it does in the sense of it's individual tiny instances all around the world doing that. Such a big problem. Whatnot. But then I'd ask someone like, if you go to the toilet, and let's just say you spend 15 minutes a day going to the toilet, that's roughly equivalent to about 1% of your day. Is this a big deal to you? Is this a huge problem? Like, okay, well, it's kind of necessary in a way, right? Like, and if you looked at it, if I said, you spend 1% of your life on the toilet, it's kind of like, well, that's not that big a problem. Like, it's not if you were just saying like 1% of your time of your entire lifetime, that's equivalent to let's just say you live 100 years. That's 1 year, one full year that you spend on the toilet. What a travesty, what a waste of a life that you're doing this. And it's like, well, you can't really add it up like that. That's not really how it works. And then there's all sorts of other ways you could do this, where it's like, if you calculated the amount of time that you spend on the toilet, cleaning clothes, washing, on the phone, things like that, it'll add up to more than 100%. And so when people are saying, all this energy is going for mining, it's like, okay, but it's also kind of like heating houses in cold areas. It's also energy that wouldn't have been used otherwise. So it's kind of, it's not like it's stealing it directly from the grandma who needs aircon to survive in the hot Australian summer. It's like, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Yeah.
No, I like that. That's a good analogy, I think.
Yeah, I need to refine it a little bit more.
Refine it a bit, but I do like it. I do like it. That makes a lot of sense. I think, like, just in terms of the percentages and how silly it is to sort of view BTC like that.
Yeah, like saying it uses as much as a small country is, it's not the right way of framing things. And you can see this in other areas, like the pay gap. So women earn 75 cents for every dollar a man earns, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, across their lifetime, yes. But then if you look at a breakdown of, well, women work less because they typically have kids, and then they spend more time away from work. So they also spend a shit ton less time actually working. Does this, like, once you get into the details of these sorts of things, it generally starts to make sense, and you can go, okay, I understand why this seems like a big problem if you just take this real surface level look at it. But if you start to dive into it, most of these things start to make more sense and aren't actually a problem, and kind of like an indication that things are going well in a way.
Yeah, well, and if you look at industries as well, so if you look at education, schools, primary schools in particular, women make way more money than men. Like, so if you just looked at that, you're like, well, this is the facts across the board, right? So yeah, 100%. So the next topic is lightning, and you've kind of alluded to this already, but yeah, Get Off Zero Lightning. You're obviously using it. Like, how are you using it aside from podcasting? I suppose, are you doing transactions with it, like sort of day to day? Is there places in Brisbane where you can actually utilize it to buy sort of physical goods and that sort of thing? And where are you at with lightning?
Yeah. So the bulk of it is going through the actual podcasting apps themselves and whatnot. I have used it elsewhere though. So this shirt that I'm wearing, for example, which is a Fountain FM shirt, I'm pretty sure I paid through that via Lightning. So just sent that to Oscar Mary over in the UK, and then he sent a shirt over to me.
Beautiful.
So I have used it in those kind of international type ways and I have wanted to use it more in those international type ways with supporting other people and for whether they're having a health issue or something, and it's like, can you please help out, or there's another podcast that I really liked, and I remember trying to send through $25 even just to the UK to get a shirt of theirs. Was such a horrendous experience. I basically had to know exactly where my friend Sammy lived, the address of his bank, the address of the sub bank, local bank that he went to. It was such a pain in the ass. So the use cases of it still keep rising for me. I have done some mini experiments here in Brisbane for sure. So in terms of getting out some cash, there's it's funny where they pop up, these Bitcoin ATMs. They can be in some really, really random places. There was one which was in my local area, which is not particularly, it's still kind of 15 minutes into the city, and there was just this small convenience store, not even in like a big shopping center or anything, which had it. There is a place called the Crypto Cafe here in Brisbane, which has you can pay for banana bread, coffee, all the stuff you normally get at a cafe, with multiple different avenues. Unfortunately, this was where it's still like, okay, it's not prime time yet. So I went there, just wanted to get some banana bread or something just to test it out.
Yeah.
And it still probably took 15 minutes of going back and forth via different wallets, having to input in, the amount in Satoshis instead of the, dollar amount into my own phone. It was not a seamless experience. Let's put it that way. So that ability to use, whatever wallet that I want to connect with whatever system it is that they're using, that it's still, and this is literally a place called the Crypto Cafe. So, they're in terms of doing it in a consumer direct way, it was still a pain in the ass. So it's not ready for prime time in my eyes yet, but the use cases of it and the I suppose like all the stats and all the data. I'm not a wizard at these sort of things, but from what I can see, like more Bitcoin is making its way onto the Lightning Network in terms of like channel capacities and things like that. So it's something I'd like to use more for sure, but it's finding those small niches where it makes sense is also like a consideration.
Yeah. Wallet of Satoshi is probably the best for that as well. So like the it's custodial, but like having the interface where you can just put in Aussie dollars or US dollars, whatever it is, invoice, boom, pay, like it's done pretty well.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. All right. Well, shout out to the Crypto Cafe.
Yeah.
Love to onboard them to a better app, I think.
Yeah. Whatever they were using was just not just great.
Trash.
And I mean, even the staff still needed help from the the actual like owner of the cafe to be
Right,
like,
right, right.
someone wants to use a slightly different method and whatnot.
Yeah.
Another one was just directly as well at Bitcoin meetups. So sometimes people will bring along meat or some honey in particular here in Brisbane,
Nice.
and if someone orders pizzas or something, it's like, well, I'll just send you some BT, like how much was my pizza worth, or my share of the pizza. Okay, here's $5, here's $6, send it to this. They just put a QR code on the screen or whatever, and
Done and done. I
yeah,
love that. That's
yeah.
awesome. So this is what I wanted to ask you as well. So running your own node, so getting off zero
Yeah.
nodes. I assumed you were, like, because you're obviously very avid with the podcasting 2.0, value for value, and Lightning. Like with that, are you running a node to do any of that sort of stuff?
I'm not. It's another one of these ones where I've spent some serious time looking at this. It was in my kind of goals for ages to get a node to really experience this part of it as well. Once again, it's the use cases for which I really want to use it for make it. Those barriers were just a little bit too high for me, and so what I was in particular looking at was at the time the Umbral box I think was out of stock or something, so I couldn't order a pre-made Umbral box. I would have had to have gone down the Raspberry Pi sort of route.
Yeah,
and once again, it's just considerations, man. The place that I stay here. I kind of alternate between this residence and my parents. And so if something happens to it whilst I'm not in here, that's potentially a couple of days where it's going to be down until I come back and reboot it or whatnot. And that would then be a couple of days of not being able to get support from my listeners, for example. So
yep, that makes sense.
Once again, like in terms of the mentality, the ethics behind it, the reason why it's important, I'm 100% there. There's no qualms on that front. It is just the practical implementation for me is still just beyond my grasp, and circumstances that I live in also dictate that it's just not the smartest decision to do right of at this moment. But,
that's totally fair.
Yeah, when things
fair.
change, if the amount that I was receiving from my supporters of the podcast 1,000x'd overnight.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's I'm not going to keep that amount of Bitcoin on custodial ones. Like I'll get my own. I will I will take all the necessary steps to really be able to be like, okay, this is some serious money going on and whatnot. Okay, like I've got to secure this in the proper way.
Yep. Well, no, it's probably a wise decision for the interim anyway. I still think it's a fun thing to run a node and get it set up, but even I've stuffed up a bunch of them, like opening channels, and just like lost BTC.
Yeah,
just wrecked it. So yeah, it's probably good. But I mean, it is like there is some really cool apps integrated with them as well. So like the Umbral's really cool. I use something called Citadel, which is like a fork of that that does like privacy off the bat. Really cool, like just fun thing to play around with and try all the different resources on there. Casa was the first one I had. They don't do nodes anymore, but it was really, really like easy interface. It wasn't on a Raspberry Pi, like you actually just bought it from them and it was already synced to the blockchain. But
what do you think about ones like Breeze, which is also non-custodial, but it's not. I don't even know exactly how it works. I just know that it's the wallet that is on there is non-custodial.
It's meant to be a node like running on the phone. Yeah, I've never wrapped my head around that. Actually, Dave Jones told me about that. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And I installed it. I'm like, I don't get how this is a node. So yeah,
yeah, exactly.
In my head, like a node is like, unless they mean like a node in the Breeze network or something. So maybe it's like their own infrastructure. I'm not sure. But I think getting a Raspberry Pi, like they're relatively cheap. and setting it up. It's just a good learning experience anyway. And you don't necessarily have to put sats on it to play around with it.
Yeah, this
Open
is true.
channels.
This is true.
So finally, Kyrin, thanks heaps for joining. This has been awesome.
Oh man, so much fun.
Yeah, just learning about your whole journey. Getting off zero edu. So obviously you're an avid reader. You're looking at a lot of content all the time. Where's the best places to go for you personally that we can sort of share with other people to learn about BTC?
Yeah, I've already mentioned if you're a reader, I would definitely say the Bitcoin Standard. That's the only real Bitcoin book I've read so far. And when I say it's a Bitcoin book, it's 70-80% of it is about money, and then the last 20% is like, okay, and this is why Bitcoin is the best money. So it's certainly not a like a fanboy type one. I learned more about money from that book than I did about Bitcoin. I think that's a pretty handy place to start. The other resources that I've found in particular, this is one thing I've noticed with people who have been in the Bitcoin like space for a while. I think they struggle to explain like where they first learnt everything, because a lot of it is from stuff which doesn't really make sense anymore, or they were using wallets or infrastructure or code which just doesn't apply anymore. So I've always liked to kind of say the journey that I've taken to learning more about it. So I know you've talked with Andreas Antonopoulos before. I think his sort of content is evergreen. So any of the podcasts that he gets into, he's got the right mix of technical know-how if you want to listen to that, and then also the broad scale. This is why this is important for countries like Argentina, and just on that note as well, looking for the use cases in your own life. So the reason why you've got a huge listenership in Argentina is because their money is screwed. Like when I was there in 2018, I think it was like $7 Australian would get you 100 pesos, something like that. When I returned back less than a year later in 2019, $7 would then get you 200 pesos. And so it was like, oh, I've got double the amount. Awesome. But the price of everything had also doubled. And so I was kind of left going like, oh, wow, that's super confusing. Now, whether it was 7 to 100, I can't remember, but you get the idea of it doubling. And when I had a girlfriend there at the time, and basically she would earn her money via cash, straight up Argentinian pesos. And it was kind of like, for her, it was an off-on type gig type deal. It would just be like, maybe this week should get some, not work this other week, etc., etc. And basically she would earn this Argentinian peso, and then the immediate kind of thing to do was either, one, I need to spend this, or two, I need to convert this to USD, because in a month's time it's going to be kind of 10% less, something like that, of its value amount. So holding cash of any amount is just not a great idea. And the amount of drama that we had to go through to convert that to USD was horrendous. We would have to go from where she was living in Palermo into the city center of Buenos Aires to a particular intercambio that she knew, a cambio that she knew about, which would have a better rate of transfer of into USD. She had to go into kind of like this locked room with a guy behind this steel grate to be able to put the money in, and it was just the amount of effort and time we spent over relatively small amounts of cash was ridiculous. It was absolutely insane. And so seeing these kind of use cases in your own life, if I had never traveled, I would have not seen how desperately a thing like Bitcoin is needed, where it's not reliant on a corrupt Argentinian government. It's not reliant on this just outside force, which you have well, I suppose it is in a way. It's the outside force of the kind of community of each individual miner, of people with nodes, of all of these kind of entities working together, and yeah, there is no one dictating force like a government, which can at the drop of a hat change everything upon you. So seeing expanding your horizons a little bit, and if you meet someone from Latin America, from Venezuela, from Argentina, hell, even Colombia and Chile, the kind of more well-off countries there, you'll find out pretty quickly why they are more interested in, or why there is a use case for BTC that is desperately needed. And that is the most important thing for me. Like the money go up, number go up sort of thing. It's a second order effect of the use case of BTC making the world a better place.
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you on that. And I think like looking at all these countries like the Philippines now, looking at adopting, and places in Central Africa, and all these places that have really been screwed over for a long time. It's so nice to see. It kind of sucks that like in Australia we're going to have to go through that before people sort of wake up to the ills of fiat currency and what it can do. Because the average Joe here, you sort of speak to them, and they still think BTC is a Ponzi scheme. Granted, it's probably people who haven't traveled around and haven't seen.
You can do it on your like individual case as well. My dad is firmly entrenched in that camp, and sometimes it's just through your own actions that the use of it becomes relevant. Like I can try and intellectually explain it to him as much as I want, and it's not going to get through. It's going to be the time when he is, his credit card stops working, or he gets, kicked out of the banking system because of an irregular payment or something like that. And that's when it'll be like, if you had some Bitcoin, this wouldn't be as big of a problem. So yeah, I hope we in general don't have to experience too much pain like other countries have, and it can be something that you maybe use without even knowing, kind of smart people creating companies and doing things so that's behind the scenes. But,
Strike, for example.
But we'll have to see. Hopefully, it'll probably be a mix of the two.
Exactly. Well, on that note, I'll let you go because we've gone well over time. But thank you so much for joining. This is awesome. Where can people? What's the best place to go to follow you? I know you're on all sorts of platforms, and Instagram's probably the best from what I've seen.
Look, there's If you type in Mere Mortals Podcast into just a Google search, and there'll be a bunch of things that'll pop up. So choose whatever you want from there. But yeah, in terms of a recommendation, like I'd almost say that people should check out the interview that we did. So I had you on the podcast, and it's a great way to, if you enjoyed the kind of conversation here and want to learn more about Kyrin, that's and your kind of stories related to the schools and actual use cases of exposing children to it and whatnot. I think that's a good place for people to kick off and get a taste.
Great idea. Awesome. Oh, thanks heaps, Kyrin, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Oh yeah, man, much appreciated. I'll definitely be getting you on again.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.